Hey everyone, this is Tom. Welcome to the Pernstar channel again. Today we're out here at Gem Sport to finally get going on the black car, and for the first round of parts that we're going to throw on the car, it's all about the rear suspension. So we've got our ISC coilover kit, the rear shocks, the rear springs, the adjustable perches, and then we've got the first round of FDF parts, so all the adjustable rear arms for the kind of rocket science-y multi-link suspension on this thing. This is so much more convoluted than the cars I typically work on, so it's already going to be very interesting on how to align this thing once all those arms are on the car. Which is pretty cool. Naturally, this is also the first time working on this car, so there's a little bit of exploratory surgery involved here too. So first thing I noticed when we actually got under the car is that there's some damage underneath there. Some of the suspension arms we're actually going to be replacing are all pretzeled up on this car, so there must have been some kind of incident potentially involving a curb or whatever. Also, somebody tried to lift the car up by the floorboards and left some gnarly dents underneath there. But yeah, nothing we can't fix. Shouldn't stop progress in any way, shape, or form. The exhaust, we come to find out, is not actually stock. So there's like some homebrew H-pipe setup going on underneath there, and then it's got Flowmaster mufflers welded in. It's a pretty janky setup, but it actually sounds pretty good. So I'm probably gonna leave that on there for a bit. It looks like in order to change out all these arms, especially the top ones, it'll be easier once the cradle is dropped from the car. So in order to drop the cradle, we're just going to take the back half of the exhaust system off and then drop the cradle and start swapping out the arms. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do over here is, after dropping the exhaust, we're going to have to take the stock shocks out and get ready for the new adjustable ones. Peasant spec toolkits. All the arms are removed. The only thing left are the actual coil springs, and according to the internet you need to drop the cradle to get those out. There really isn't a good way to get to them with a spring compressor, so we may just have to suck it up and drop the cradle a little bit. Boo. Yeah, indeed. So here's a quick side-by-side look of some of these FDF arms for the S550 rear end, and like I said earlier, I may put text over top of this of what these arms are called. I think this is the upper control arm, but I'm not sure. You can see that unlike the factory forging, the FDF one is going to be fully adjustable on the car, and it's got heim joints on both ends instead of these rubber bushings. So this tuning fork looking thing is like a lower lateral arm, and you can see from the factory it's sheet metal stamping welded together, rubber bushing in it, whereas the FDF one has a nice heim joint, it's fully adjustable, and then has a welded fork on the other end. And it's actually good that I'm replacing these on the car, because this is what one side looked like versus the other. So as you can see, evidently this car has had a bit of a history of, you know, going through your usual side effects of being owned by a Mustang owner. Which leaves us with one more arm that we're going to be replacing here. They connect the knuckle to the lower control arm, and you can see there's this conical bushing, same as here, but this is just probably like 3mm steel stamping, whereas this is all billet and adjustable. A little bit of wrenchy footage there. All good. Aha! Getting close. There we go. Comes the interesting part. Sitting on it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man, should have probably used both hands for this, huh? Whee! Bouncy boys. Out with the stock. In with the, well, better, I guess. Wee-hee. We're halfway done, right? Teardown complete. Let's go over real quick what we had to do to get all these parts out of the car. So you'll notice that I did end up dropping the subframe. I was trying to see if you can do this without dropping the subframe. And as far as the FDF arms go, you can actually get all three of them out of the car without dropping the subframe. I will say though that on the subframe, the mount for the upper control arm is right next to the filler neck. So this one is a little bit of a pain to get to when the cradle isn't dropped, but it is doable. We actually ended up dropping the cradle to pull the springs, because I'm sure it would have been possible to get the springs out, but it didn't feel very safe to do so. So we proceeded to drop the cradle. But as I said, if you're only about changing out the arms, you can do it without dropping the cradle out of the car. Okay, up next is going to be the install of all the parts. And I just want to touch on the three different arms real quick and give you some pointers as to what hardware you need to buy, because when changing your shocks from factory to aftermarket and when using the tow arm, you're going to actually have to use some nuts that normally are welded onto the factory parts. So these are the upper control arms. Upper control arm is going to go into the subframe back here, and then this conical seat will go onto the knuckle, and you have to have it facing downwards so it clears the body when the suspension compresses. And you can see that this arm is off center to the bushing, and you want the bushing basically to be behind the arm. You want to get as much clearance to the axle as you can, so the arm goes as far forward in the car as possible. So that's how the upper control arm is going to be mounted. And what you'll notice on the subframe is that in the subframe there are actually slots to adjust camber. And when you mount this arm, you will have your adjustability from the arm itself. So since when this car is lowered, you're going to gain negative camber and you want to compensate for that, I'm going to attempt to mount the arm all the way out, and we'll see if that gives me enough adjustability. I think it will. I checked that you can make the FDF arm a little bit shorter than the factory arm. So if it ends up being too far out, you know, you should be able to shorten it and actually account for that. So that's where I'm going to start, and once we align the car, we'll see if that was the right move. I've mentioned it earlier, but the suspension on this car is the most complex rear suspension I've personally worked with. There is just a multitude of arms, and anytime you have a multi-link suspension like this, each individual arm that you adjust isn't just going to affect a single setting. They're all interlinked, but every arm has a primary adjustment function, and we're going to focus on that for now. So the upper control arm on this kit is for the most part going to affect your camber. So as you lengthen and shorten this, it's going to affect your camber the most. From this angle, we're not going to be able to see this arm installed very well. We're going to look at it when it's in from under the car. But this is going to be your toe arm, and it attaches to the cradle right here, and then it attaches to the knuckle. And this is where I said you need to buy some extra hardware, because there is no weld nut on the FDF part. So it ends up being an M14x2 is the nut that you'll want to be able to reuse the factory bolt that goes through here. And once you have that nut, nothing's holding me back from putting this on the car. From the factory, there is an eccentric adjustment here for the toe arm. You still retain that, of course, but now you're also getting an adjustable arm with the FDF upgrades, so it should make it way nicer to dial in the alignment. So primary function of this, as far as adjustments go, is going to be to control your toe. The last of the FDF arms that we're going to be putting on this car is the knuckle link. And again, another one of those parts you're going to see better from under the car, and we're looking at it later. But this basically ties the lower control arm to the knuckle. And that's the one that is a bit of a head scratcher when you first look at the suspension layout on this car as to what this actually does. But basically, the primary function of this being adjustable is that you can fine-tune your anti-squat characteristics with this link. So this is one that you can reuse all the factory hardware on. It's got the conical seat going towards the knuckle, which from the factory came with a bolt and a nut on the back. And then the lower control arm is actually threaded, so there is just a fastener that goes through the arm to hold it in place. So we're just going to go ahead and throw all these arms back on the car. Thinking I'm probably going to start with just mounting the upper control arm to the cradle while the cradle is dropped. Then I'm going to put the springs in, mount the cradle to the chassis again, and then proceed to mount the rest of the arms, because at that point we can lift the car back up and it'll just be easier to work on it. Alright. Yeah, these are just like, I don't even care if they work or not, just look how much nicer these look, you know. There's no problem grabbing the right too.
Yep. Drop it.
Okay, subframe is touching again. Let's hope that all the bolts line up, and then we'll finish installing the arms. The additional jack stand is holding the control arm in place so that the springs stay where they need to be, while I'm getting the subframe hand tight again. No ugga-duggas yet. Cool. Yeah, I'm just gonna mount the upper control arm to the knuckle, and then we won't get any droop that pulls our springs back out of the perch, basically. Whee! Sweet! Now the check stands can come out. So we're filming this beginning of March in Michigan, and it's freezing outside. And it's so nice to be in here with the heat on. Hard to believe that there are still people wrenching in their driveways and stuff. I do not miss those days.
Yeah, just at me, shit.
Yeah. Subframes in, springs are in, upper arms are in. Just figured I'd do.
They hit the axle.
Yeah, for now, but.
Oh.
The toe arm in there. So.
Not too bad of a job.
No, it's fine. Oh, you're filming me, aren't you? That's 130 on the 4 subframe and 40 on the little guys holding on the brackets. So getting my morning workout in. Extension for those. Over-torqued those, but that just didn't feel right. Equal. Man, there we go. Initially it looks like you'll want to set the excenter to be out as far as possible so you get the most thread engagement out of your arm. Same thing on the other side then. Oh, you're still filming me, huh? So yeah, these are the arms you had to buy hardware for in order to mount them. And these are also the arms with the factory eccentric adjustment here. And like I said, on the other side, I'm gonna mount those eccentric bolts as far towards the outside as possible, so for as much toe out as possible, because I just want to have as much thread engagement on these puppies as we can get, so might as well. Yeah, so far this whole job has been a piece of cake. The fitment of all the parts has been awesome so far, and it's really the only thing you need are some really basic hand tools. I think so far we've used a 13, 15, 18 and a 21mm socket. That was literally the extent of the tools required, so no biggie there. And we're live again. Sick. With the shocks, when you're upgrading to your coilover kit, two things that are worth noting is that on the bottom mount of the shock, the factory actually has the nuts incorporated into the design, and there's this aluminum piece up here that the top of the shock is mounted to. So you'll have to reuse this piece, and you need to use nuts with your aftermarket parts because they're not threaded like the OEM pieces are. Okay, so this is the ISC shock that came with the coilover kit. You can see holes down here aren't threaded, so you need to source some nuts. The damper adjustment is right up here, and that's not going to be obstructed by the bracket. The kit comes with the nut that is needed to hold the top piece on. It's a nylock nut, and down here it's pretty clever. They actually added wrench flats to the rod of the shock so that you can actually torque this down. So that's going to work out nice. And once I have that bolted together, we're going to throw it in the car. So cool when it's all brand new and still moves. And then of course, being a track car and never seeing salt is going to make sure it stays that way. $1,000,000 question. Where do all these leftover bolts go? So because the shocks don't actually have the threaded inserts like right welded to the bottom of them, and you have to use nuts here, turns out that it's quite interesting to actually get to this. So I used the OEM bolts coming in from the top, and then we're just using M10 by 1.5 millimeter pitch nuts from the bottom up. And when you check here, you can just barely drop the nut down there onto that bolt right next to your axle. There's like almost no room, but with a swivel socket on the ratchet here, should be able to get a hold of it, but it's just barely. On the bottom, of course, it's easy. Yep, there we go. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Dang. First try. That'll work. Yeah, I don't know how much you can see from the camera right now, but the control arm, the lower control arm on these, it's like a cradle that the shock sits in, and you really don't have a whole lot of room to get to anything. So I kind of wish that they would have just done the same welded on nuts like the factory. So this video is just about the install of these parts, and as you've seen, everything's pretty smooth, just a couple of hand tools, it's really nothing to it. If there's enough interest, I may do an actual video on how to adjust all these new arms, you know, and when I dial the car in. I could give people pointers if anyone cares, we'll see. Just, you know, let me know in the comments if that's something you want to see. I just wanted to use this shot real quick to demonstrate the toe arm and how it now allows you to adjust your toe. I'm hoping that's going to come across in the video. I've got the camera aimed square at the rotor, and so now if I extend the length of this arm, I hope it's going to be a severe enough change that you can actually pick it up on the camera. After a long day of wrenching under the race cars, you know, I gotta enjoy a metrosexual monster, you know.
No.
Okay. Good enough to put the wheels on. Guess one of those lugs has seen better days. But since we're gonna probably run like 3-inch spacers or something anyway, it's not gonna matter. Yeah, this one is all crooked. Looks like we got crazy toe out and all kinds of camber. So this is gonna look like crap once it's sitting on the ground, but that's okay. If you were wondering how low ISC coilovers go in the rear of these, This is the lowest setting on them, and I need to put 2x4s under the tires to get it off the lift, so apparently low enough. Victory! Yeah, please ignore the alignment for now because obviously that's garbage. But as you can see, it's tucking the OEM wheels and tires nicely. So I don't know if that's low enough for everyone's liking. It's definitely low enough for me. May actually have to raise the car some, we'll have to see. But looks good, all went together. So that concludes our rear coilover and FDF arm kit install on the S550. Like I said, if enough of you guys care to see it, I'll gladly put something together on how to align it with the kit. And then as soon as the rest of the parts come in, we're gonna tackle what you actually want to see, which is the front. And I'm really stoked for that because it's gonna look silly with all this angle. Quiet. I don't even know why they put mufflers on these. This is essentially open headers with cats and you can barely hear the car.